final frontier, where no man and no woman has gone before. Recognize they already been there. Or anything that analyzes the screen adaptations of process, and that communicates the lines of flux. We have to process our indicating system, how to use the core centers of travel, how to direct line and link, and that communicate to a system. We have to truly understand how to set lines of our own dream interpretations that is space itself. That puts our position of Earth, which is no longer in settings, now is in full memory of no memory. Access to memory it already has. So we have to really understand how to use everything of the supposition of space, knowing exactly how to modify that and triangulate to its system, location to its all levels of its own conscious, its own awareness, is to control everything of its navigation system. All right, so basic grounds and positions, cyberkinetics, synapse, travels of point graphs, communication lines of interface, interference, line course centers, and direct lines and line connection setting to quantum lines, lines of change up, lines of sequence. I just keep going on and on and on and on. Because what am I doing? I'm processing just space itself. The intelligence of its travels, okay, to the systematic lines to its symbiote that process everything and calculates its screen lines, adaptation to its settings, and process inner lines of existing to its levels of formations of changing formations and setting. Space is very complicated because it doesn't have a scale, it doesn't have a balance, it doesn't have a measure. It doesn't have patterns, it doesn't have anything in clocking, it doesn't have anything in foundation, but it knows what it is of its own system. Earth has its own tractions and settings, so does space. You put those together, there's two conversions into one. The body has to adjust that into the mind conception and really understand how to perceive not just the levels of its consciousness, but understand how to project it. It knows exactly how to bring things in through the mind, the adaptation, imagination that brings in the body, that brings things in real time. Now you adjust that set position, that's two projections into one. The body is the projector, okay? That's the infrastructure in set position. But you guys have to have your own specifications. What I mean by that is to understand how to recognize that in its platitude and its performance. Knowing the efficacies to its systems, all through tractions, direct lines and grounds. Let's get into position locations and just basically understand the quantum physics. And that lines of screen lines, set lines of travel, right? Everything has a ground line descending and travel. It communicates the highest position location to its systems. So we're going to allocate time frames, and we're going to get more specific and less confusion, which means that as I set up an equation, okay, it comes in its own setting and its own system to its own formula. It systematically designs its settings and calculations to its screens, processes its indications setting and calculation. So those line division and rotations. Let's just go through triangulation, right? Okay. You keep watching it, it's moving itself. You keep watching it moving itself, but it's never triangulation. It's always something different. You never see the same frequency of a triangle. Triangle is a ground sending sequence, right? But if it's just space, it's moving on its own, which means it's understanding how to navigate it. And for you to understand that is the process of all levels of its memory. The memory itself has to recognize this memory, which is no memory, have access to memory you always have. And that puts you in a position how to use that in lines of travel. Okay, getting connected with that is confirmation altogether, working as one setting, one subunit. A subunit is basically how to use everything that you come in position of, is using it to the lefty from one particle to a subparticle or anything that line setting locates to its system to cells or anything in position of protons, electrons, and neutrons, or photons or neurons. What you have to start identifying is being specific how you bring things in, okay? Knowing that we got trillion cells in our body, yes, but we don't use a trillion cells. You have to be specific how you bring that in, how you basically understand the ridges of a puzzle. If it doesn't fix in that position, you put it in somewhere else in tractions. You find a piece of puzzle that puts it together. Then you see the image, right? So the ridges don't fit. Well, take another puzzle, take another piece, and that position, process in that position lines of travel. So that indicates position in the center. So see the triangulation, right? Now the triangulation is this. So it's constantly on a continuous flow of travel. It's never, ever going to be a triangulation because it's moving too fast in moderation. Okay? It's never the same shape. It just constantly moves. Okay? That's all it is. That's space. All right, so every time you look at it, it's something different. Okay, it's something different. So it's a constant continuous flow. Now, it can basically do anything it wants. It modifies its own system of its own intelligence, its own consciousness, but it's constantly aware of what it's doing of its own system, which puts everything all together, right? So it triangulates, it formulates, it shapes its anomalies, it shapes its space, it shapes its time on how it sees and how it is its own entity force. You guys have to recognize that is that running train. And that's why I like to analyze that sentence. Knowing how to navigate the running train is to get in your telepathies. Modifying that is all through memory, through space, because the structures are more complicated because never in the same design. It's a constant, continuous flow of internal external force that rotates its system and settings. How it goes through its galaxies, how it goes through the universe, how it goes through its schematics, how it goes through its pi, how it goes through its connection, how it goes through foundation, or how it goes through its clocking. And it's in its own space and it's in its own time. You have to find a way to come into your own specifications into all levels of being specific, how you break these things in, because your body is just empty. It is the nothing that processes everything on no memory, right? So there's nothing to start off with, right? It's an ongoing continuance that puts you in position as a setting. Now, understanding that is a lot more understanding how you see yourself through your own formula, to your own equations of space, the specifics, okay, how you come in your own codification, in your own imaginations to your systems. So it's a constant, continuous flow that constantly rotates its own system of its own operation. And it works all together. See, you're touching it. Now it's in confirmation with you, right? Now you're in the memory of its system on a digital pad. It's set lines of travel, right? So it's amazing when you come into that. See, it's moving on its own. I'm not touching it. It's doing it on its own now, right? It's got its own system. It's got its own operation. It's got its own convergence, so it's used its that position. So everything around you has its own operation of its own mind, guys. And mind alterates its setting. That's where it comes into the altered state. That's what we have to understand to its mind conceptual settings, to understand how to use everything through its telepathy, so you can understand how to televise your system, telecommunicate your telegraphic communication, code traffic, code divisions, knowing exactly how to use the monoread system and use to monetize, so you can process this a lot more easier, how you see that information set in a balance and work together as a unification of a subunit, right? Each cell in your body is an information bit, right? Now, sometimes it's 10,000 per second, 10,000 per minute, 10,000 per hours. So like I said, you're 2 minutes on the phone on Earth, okay? Earth line ground, 3 centers of lines of sequence, 4 centers of travel, 4 direct line course centers. Earth and space at the same time. That's Earth and space at the same time, right? So surrendering to the current flow, you're now touching the anomalies of its own system. So you're putting your finger in the cloud, and the cloud's trying to recognize you in frequency, but the cloud sees you in memory, right? You don't see yourself in memory until you touch these things. So it's modifying that. It's giving you instructions already for you to modify that because it's already been through timeline with you. Now that gets a line communication. We have Earth and space at the same time. It's seeing 2 provisions, 2 windows of sent lines of travel that modifies sent lines of communication, right? Earth and space, right? Let's see, Earth and space is one, okay? There's no inside or outside of anything in settings, right? Your projection, okay, is you and how you see things in reality, that surface of your systems. Your projector is your body, but your infrastructure and your settings. So it's really understanding how you modify your system. Like if you see a triangulation, okay, that's a triangulation, right? But the triangulation is this, the triangulation is this, so it never stops running its own system. It just keeps moving. Just keeps moving, it keeps expanding itself, right? You have to find a way to navigate your own system and bring it in through its memory. It's a process understanding the test of what's going on with your system now through your body, through real time, so you can process what's going on with projections. Your travels works on timelines, your travel works on process line communications, your existing information setting, your systematic line screen adaptations, and travels of recognition. Okay, all levels of travel working all together, right? Telepathy is very powerful when you start recognizing that in that settings, okay? Because there's nothing of separation. That looks separated? No, right? It looks separated, but it's not. But you ask yourself, why is it moving by itself? Why is it moving by itself? because it doesn't need to identify itself. You have to identify it through memory. It doesn't need to understand your memory. You have to understand the memory of you because it's already knowing you already. It's gone through its timeline with you already. And that's what you have to start recognizing into space, into cybergenetics, cyberkinetics, cybermagnetics, information system, all through travel and direction. Okay, it's very simple how to modify that. And in portals of communication of Stargate, right? But space just constantly keeps moving. It never, ever stops for anyone. Okay? You have to slow it down. You have to put it in position. You have to navigate your system. You got to use your telepathy. You got to use your telekinesis. You got to use your intent. You got to use all levels of your influence and mind alterate your system. So you can bring in the state, everything of memory coming into confirmation of balance. Now, once it recognizes you, you recognize each other through memory. Okay? And that's how you work with that. And then you go through their timeline. They give you a tour, an all-line tour on all communication, real-time existing, all of us, all at once. They give you a tour, right, of your timeline you've been with them. And the more you process that, the more the body gets adjusted, the more the body understands what's going on with the power perception. That puts you in a high lines of all communication setting into its position of its surface and travel. Okay? So, a running train is just a running train. You have to understand the train itself. Okay, let's process the train. That's the train. Okay, that's the train, right? See, it's moving itself, see? I'm not communicating with it. It's on its own, right? For me to communicate with, I got to use my telepathy, right? So as soon as I use my telepathy, it's got to connect with my frequency so I can connect with its frequency. So we connect up to each other, but we use it through all levels of telepathy. There's nothing separated in the mind line. That's this subparticle coming to a subunit. That's a unification of intelligence, okay, into its travels of recognition of memory of cortex that puts you in a mind collaboration system of its intelligence. Now, once we understand how to use that information setting, now I'm in position of balance, working with its intelligence of space, working together as we circulate and rotate as one. And that's all it is in unification. That's the subunit, right? But we use our telepathies to connect, right? But the cells never, ever touch each other. They only go through the mind, through intelligence. And they set it up through the animation that brings the process of real time. That's how everything comes into solid matter. But wait, you have to stand in that position of the width, the awareness, the intelligence of its travels, knowing exactly what you're doing in that position. This helps you operate your system, knowing exactly what you're doing in space alone. That puts you in Earth lines, position, location, and balance. Direct and redirect. Working together all in one setting and one sequence. One pattern, one operation, one travel. So it's a constant, continuous flow, guys. That's an internal, external force that just keeps moving on itself. Right? See? Moving on itself. Shaping its own anomaly. See, it's changing different time, different space, different modules, different bodies, different costumes, right? It's on its own waving pattern. It's on its own codification system. It's on its own binary. It's on its own algorithm. It's on its own operation of its own entity force, right? You want to communicate with it, you got to use your telepathy. Once you use your telepathy, then it comes in and sees you. Okay? And now you want to change it, but you got to change the current flow. Now you're working together. They see you, you see them. You're taking your frequency, they're taking their frequency, and you're modifying your system to a subunit. You're bringing that into correlation of balance, a posture core center, so you don't get quantum interference, because that's a compromise. That puts lines of quantum entanglement with yourself and each other. So the more you modify these things, the more you keep going through space and set position lines of time. Right? And you work together as a singularity. Singularity of one, everything of one. 2 ones in positions, 4 lines of setting the sequence, 4 ones in travel, 4 bedding and position lines, box frames, and travel communication. Right? Pretty simple. Change the other line centers. You have to indicate its system, what's going on with its own frequency, of its own setting, its own design. Then you work with inside that works everything outside in travel. Okay? But again, it's on its own system, working with its own system of travel. See? It's on its own. So when you know how to control a running train, The train is controlling you, and you are controlling the train. Your frequency to its frequency, a balance of communications, bringing all lines, settings, all through travel or recognition. Okay? Working together, working in unification of one setting. That's one unit. Okay? So just start off with the simple tactics and try to understand everything around your system is now in its own system, its own operation, its own running, and its own machine. That basically is not just the rise of machines. The machine itself is trying to get you identification here settings. So when you guys wake up, it's in its memory of you, which is just space now. Okay, so the specifics, okay, the processing, okay, the awakening of the atmospheres, okay, into the communications of its existing space itself. Okay, so there are facts how you see facts. You have to find a way to come in your own codifications. Now you guys got your A, B's, and C's. Now you have to try to understand how you see A, B, and C. Not how A, B, and C sees its own levels of its own space, of its own system, right? So A is interactions, B is on setting, C is on calculation, right? So you're in control. You're in control. You don't see it moving. Now, if you're not in control, okay, it's going to move on its own system. Okay, it's moving its own now. See, you can see it moving, right? That's what you have to get control of, is using your telepathy, mastering the ascension of you through the oversoul of Earth. Now you got to master the ascensions of all levels of space of the oversoul. Okay, it's two lines over lines of pi, over in sequence, over lines of communications. Process of that indications, attraction, equal lines equation. All right, direct lines of flux, and sent lines of travel. Okay, Earth, okay, and set position. But space itself is just itself. It doesn't have a shape. It doesn't have a form. It just knows what it is. It's an operation of its own engine, but the engine doesn't exist because space is not modified. It's not in position until you bring it in specifically, because it's all infrastructured inside of you, which is the empty, which is the nothing, which is no memory. Okay, that's space. But see, Earth and space is one. It's set lines of travel. So once you come in together, you come in position lines of settings to infinity 8 over lines of percentage over travel. There's the connection that comes into the infinity 8 system. It rotates into position. It starts to recognize space and time. Operationalize the sequence. Your body is now a surfacing engine that processes everything, indicates setting of travel. And they work together in circulation setting to synchronization, right? So that's what you have to modify through. And getting in that position, you have to mind control of all levels of telepathy, because everything's on its own system. Everything is on its own according device line position. It listens and hears everything. It has its eyes and ears and everything in position lines of travel now. The machine operation system is back to information, which is what? No memory of Earth, right? Now you have to go through space of memory, which is no memory of space. Now you collaborate the two lines of course centers comes into alignment, locates to its setting, to its cloud. And once it comes in its cloud, you come into your binaries that sets lines of communicates setting. The body starts to readjust the system of just line calculation screen lines. Then you come to your body adaptations of flux that process everything and indicates the setting of travel, right? So the binaries go inside the body. The body recognizes that, what's going on in real time, and that position of its imagination. Okay? So it's going through a mapping system now. So it's finally getting into how it uses its minds through its projection of its image. Now that puts position lines to all levels. The cloud itself becomes its own anomaly, of its own highway, of its set lines of travel. Okay, and that communicates position, location, setting. Then you have the galaxies of the wind factors, spectral line course centers, spectral lines, screen adaptations of flux, wind patterns, correlation lines, geometric lines of screen adaptations of processing, galaxy lines of alignment, flux over line cosmos, course centers of clustrum, directing lines of ground set, lines of sequence, weather lines of pattern, geostorms, directing ground set, line communication, high centers. The galaxy itself is its own system of formations, but it doesn't exist. Okay, that's its true form. Space does not exist, but it runs its own operation of its existence. That's why you can't see the wind. That's why you can't see the air. That's why you can't see the earth. That's why you can't see the grounds. That's why you can't see space. That's why you can't see time, foundation, clocking, because it doesn't have limited access. It's limitless. It's timeless, shapeless, and formless. That's space. But Earth is the same. They have to integrate each other. Okay? So that's where it comes into a subunit of unification and setting. Our worlds are all based on how we use our mind imagination, how to use the telepathy, how to use the telekinesis, how to use the intent, influence, and manipulation. Your mind altered in your state, and now you're putting your position locations, how everything body works through its all as the powers of perception. Putting that position lines as high, center, location to its binary case, and center lines of travel. Okay? So it's very powerful what you guys are coming into. Binaries into your algorithms of space, the complexity of structure of designs, and its schematics to its primers. All right? Okay, it's on its own system, working on its own setting, right? Moving in its own system, right? Okay? You see that. You're looking at the rain. Okay? Rain's looking at you, but you're not touching the rain. Rain's on its own. Okay? It's walking its own 2 feet, or 4 feet, or 6 feet, or 8 feet, or 10 feet, but it's never in 2 feet. It's never in 3 feet. It's never in 4 feet. It's constantly moving. So it never, ever, ever stops running its own operation. It's a surfacing engine that's connected to its cosmos that aligns its location to its galaxies. What you guys have to start identifying is to surrender to the current flow. That's the only way you can understand how to look at rain and control rain at the same time. That's a collaboration. That's a unification of a set position where you come into the subline, center position of a unit that processes your indication system, how you use that in tractions. This helps you to identify your systems all through calculations, all through a graph. Okay? Now, as you want to bring it in, it sees you, right? Work together, you're in position, right? See, if you're not working together, okay, it moves on by itself. You work together, you move all together all at once. So you move a fast pace, slow pace, pause space, time edit space, time calculation space, particle lines of space of anything that travels of space, space itself. But you got connection of Earth and you got connection of space, which is just an infinity of polarity, guys. That's all it is, rotation, spin, constant, and continuous flows of yin and yang. There's always in the process of always going forward. It never goes back in time, right? So it doesn't go back in time because it has no time at all. And that's why it's very confusing if you don't understand the connections of your settings when you're self-telling the operations of readjusting you, which is your story, right? Now, there's no story connected, but it knows what it is. It's no story, no calculation, no foundation, no clock, nothing, nada. So you have to be specific how you see space, how you see time, okay? Now that connects to the Earth and that connects to space to the same lines, infinity over rotations, ground standard lines of sequence that puts you in position infinity itself, right? There's infinity 8, working together, measure and scale, right? Working with the collaboration. The most powerful thing for you guys to identify, the body has to come in its own confirmation system. Now that calculates how you see your symbiotes. Now that's a whole nother set position system because you have to modify what's going on with the behavioral settings, right? Processing through that indication. The more you go into your mind line, the more you go into telepathy, the more you can control your body from inside that projects every locations from outside. Your body is the projector, and the projecting is what the body sees in real time. Okay? That's how this works. This is all the way in that position where you identify these things, right? But it's a constant, continuous line. If you throw a dart, right? You throw a dart, you're leaving the Earth, right? As soon as you throw it, it's going into space, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. But as it goes faster and faster, the altitude changes, the atmosphere changes, the geometrics of its shape changes, the sacred geometry of the system changes, the altitude changes, the oxidized states, the coloration of lights, the patterns, the actual shape itself changes because it's going faster. It never modifies in one setting on one set tractions at one angle. It's all angles all at once. So you keep throwing that dart's going to form into different shapes because it knows exactly what it's doing. It's just formulating and is taking over the navigation of you, or you're controlling and you're taking the navigation of you. So that I have to really understand how that works in a force of recognition. Is using your telepathy, understand how to use your telekinesis, sending messages back to you that they're transmitting and receiving. See your body as a transponder, so it can understand what's going on through its transistors and its resistors at the same time. Okay, that's how they become a subunit. And a unification using their telepathy to move things in your mind. Basic examples, guys, right? So as you're throwing that dart just forms into different shapes, that space. Okay, so it's never at the same shape because it's going too fast in moderation of time, which is no time. Okay, you have to bring in the time of space, or it's just going to keep moving itself. Until you understand how to see your frequencies and understand how to master yourself through ascension of the earth, and now you have to master yourself through ascension of space. There's two oversouls. That's two projections of one mapping system. Not two maps into one through one projection. You're seeing earth and space at the same time now, right? But you have to modify space through memory because you identified already earth as space. Now you have to identify space of earth. Earth, space, space, earth. Polarities. Female polarity, male polarity, right? So anything above 144, you can be anything in that position as you're going faster, but you have to recognize you're constantly in a constant continuous flow, internal to external force, and you have to control where you're going through indication. Are you going north, west, south, and east? Because if you're not indicating north, west, south, and east, if you're not being specific in your mind, how you bring these things to infrastructure that's construct location in your system of space itself, the space itself will take over your north, east, west, and south. And that's what you have to understand in that position, is how to modify that in setting. This helps you identify what's going on with you and set lines of travel, okay? So this helps you to really start to identify your system, okay? Okay, we'll stop there in tractions. There's a lot being understood. I just want you guys to get in the basic grounds of what's going on, how you use lines of space now. And how to modify that is actually understand how to use that information lines of Earth. Earth is on its own, no memory. Now space is coming in its own, no memory. That puts process a balance of one position, location, travel. Two projections, location into one. So the reality knows exactly what's going on with the body. The body knows what's going on with its reality real time. How it affects everything that it does in that position is being the specifics, how it brings everything of its nothing to its emptiness, to its no memory of space and time, okay, through operations, okay? Setting track line corresponds constellation lines, Coliseum level would be in space line and trajectory and location setting and travel. Process lines, indication lines, and position line and processing direct lines. Ground lines is sequence into panels of operation, level C, level D, level C, level D, C and 5.